we ended up staying out till like 5 a.m, but I remember we were walking back home. Makenzie and I were like goofing off, talking about the night. And then I was laughing and I was like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if, Dad was sitting right there? And then we walked closer.
Yeah,
that's hilarious. But not actually. And then
it wasn't funny.
And then we got a little closer and I tapped Kenzie on the shoulder. I was like, wait, I see a little shadow of my dad on the front porch. And I was like, there's no way. So we walk up there and he's like, good morning. Like, this is where we done goofed. We were so scared.
I was so like terrified. Like because we were a little drunk at that point too.
You're listening to Big Sis Energy.
Welcome back to Big Sis Energy. I'm your host, Makenzie.
And I'm your other host, Malia. Today is a very juicy episode, to say the least.
I'm nervous.
Me too. I'm like, oh my gosh, where do we start?
Okay, so today we're talking about how we got taken out of high school. We've mentioned this a few times on our TikTok, but we never really told y'all the tea.
Yeah, and I know we keep mentioning it, and I know you guys are curious. So this episode, we booked 2 hours for this because we knew it was going to be a long one. But we're going to be going into detail on. Well, there's a lot of different stories that led up to us getting taken out of high school.
Yes.
So we're going to go into that today.
Whew, okay. So I think where do we even begin? So basically, we were homeschooled growing up. Ever since, kindergarten to 6th grade, we were homeschooled by our wonderful mother. And we were actually homeschooled together. So we were in the same grade.
Yeah.
For a lot of you guys that are wondering, like, how are you guys not twins but in the same grade? That's how.
That always confused people because when you're actually in the same grade, it's like, okay, you guys are twins. We're like, no, we're not. We're actually a year and a day apart, but our mom just combined us. So
after 6th grade, we went to a charter school. Very small charter school. I think it was like 200 kids from K through 8.
Yeah.
Like very small school.
Yeah.
And then, so we went to a different charter school in 8th grade, but still 6th through 8th grade, all very small charter schools.
Right. During 8th grade too, we were very innocent, like very sheltered. Growing up too, we weren't allowed to do a lot of things just because our parents were very strict. And also we were the first, I'm technically the firstborn, but since Kenzie and I are so close in age, it's like we were treated as both the firstborn.
Yeah.
So obviously they have never parented kids before, and we,
we're never teenagers before.
Yeah, so it was all a new experience for everyone. And I feel like, especially, I'm sure a lot of you older siblings can relate, but your parents were probably stricter on you as the older sibling versus like your younger siblings.
Max and Michaela are younger siblings. Michaela is almost 16 and Max is 17. They have two completely different parents than Malia and I do.
Yeah.
Like, Malia and I did.
It's cool to see because obviously, I don't know, but seeing them as parents like evolve and change how they parent and like, oh, this didn't work. Let's change this and do this better, but it's crazy. And I'm like, you guys are so lucky you didn't get the super strict parents because I always crap on them for that because I'm like, oh my gosh, like Kenzie and I had it. We didn't have it rough, but they were pretty strict.
They were pretty strict.
We weren't allowed to wear shorts that were shorter than our
fingertips.
Our shorts had to go all the way down to our fingertips. And Kenzie and I are tall girls, so like our fingertips basically were to our knees.
Yeah, so Bermuda shorts.
Kenzie and I, there's that. And then we weren't allowed to really have sleepovers at other people's houses, which now looking back on is cool because there's a lot of weird people out there. Honestly, and especially if your parents don't know them, it's like, it can be kind of weird.
It's funny because I think back in when I was a kid, I thought mom and dad just hated us. And they were like, oh my gosh, I want you to suffer.
Yeah.
When in reality, your parents just want the best for you. At least in our case, our parents really, truly did want the best for us and they wanted to protect us because there are crazy people out there. And like, you don't know. Imagine, I think about this now, like when I'm a parent in 10 years, I'm going to be like, oh wait, do I want my kid going over to a stranger's house? Like, this is my little baby, my pride and joy. Like, and now it's so different looking back. In that moment, you think your parents are just like, I want you to have no fun at all.
There was never any reasoning behind it either. It was like only because this was like what they would say. They'd be like, oh, it's just because we love you guys and like we want to protect you guys. And I'm like, okay, well, I want to have fun. Because obviously too, I remember that was like how I was thinking as a kid. And you don't really think of their perspective, obviously, because you're a kid, young and immature. But going to school, seeing everyone else was allowed to, hang out with their friends, like have phones. I think I got my first phone I had to save up for myself, but I did have one for freshman year.
Yeah.
But then I got it taken away, so.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
that.
Okay, so let's go to 8th grade year. that's when I feel like we started being a little bit more rebellious. Just
slightly.
slightly, not anything crazy. We were allowed to have Snapchat, but we weren't allowed to have everybody on there.
And keep in mind that took so much convincing. Like, I don't know if you guys can relate to this, but we would have to make PowerPoint presentations for our parents to let us do like certain things, like to have an app, Instagram, even a phone. I was like, these are the reasons why I need a phone. All of the like pros and cons. And we had to do that for a lot of things that we like wanted to have as kids, which was super funny thinking about that now.
Actually is hilarious.
Oh my gosh.
I'm gonna make my kids do that. I need a PowerPoint presentation. No, I'm just kidding.
But pictures and everything.
So I think it was, we wanted to get Snapchat because all of our friends were on Snapchat, and they're like, okay, well, after many talks, it was always like we would go into their room for like an hour, and it would just be the four of us, me, Malia, my mom, and my dad, and we're like, can we have Snapchat? And they're like, no, you can't. But they finally gave in, and they said that we could have Snapchat, but we could have 4 girlfriends that they chose and allowed, and most of them are from church. So like people that they know, people that they knew that their parents were good people and stuff like that. So we were allowed to have 4 girlfriends on Snapchat. And then I remember in 8th grade, we were like, oh, dang, like I want to have all my friends on Snapchat. So we ended up having 2 accounts on Snapchat, and
we would just log in and out of them. So like one account would be with like for all of our friends, and the other one would be just for like
the 4 girls
that we were allowed to have. Well, yeah, they never really found out about any of that until a little bit later.
Yeah. But they would constantly, every week they would take our phones randomly. So they'd be like, let me see your phone. And then they'd go through like all of our apps, all of our messages. And I remember it would be like a funny video our friend would send us, and they're like, this is highly inappropriate. Like,
I mean, it wasn't appropriate, but I remember like hearing them in their room laughing about it. I'm like, see, so it is funny.
Like, it's funny. Yeah, I'm like.
But it's probably something that like, you know, young girls shouldn't be like,
I don't know. It was kind of like harmless though in a way.
Yeah.
Because like they would just be like funny memes that our friends would send us.
Right.
And obviously like, are we really in the wrong for receiving funny memes? Like, it was a meme, bro. Like, or like a Vine, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
it was just like little stuff like that. But then 8th grade ended. Nothing, I mean, it was really just little stuff like that. And then we started to actually sneak out of our house 8th grade summer. And nothing crazy either. Like, we would literally go to Walmart with our friends and get snacks.
But it was in the middle of the night.
It was, so there was no reason to do that. But we were just like, let's sneak out and
go get chips from Walmart. Like, okay, for one, that is dangerous. Like, you can't just walk around in the middle of nowhere.
Especially where we lived, because the street that you had to take to get to Walmart, there was no street light. So it was like super dark, and I don't know, but
I guess we wanted to go get chips in the middle of the night. Thanks for Walmart for having that 24 hours open though.
Because some Walmarts don't do that. Like the one by our house now, I'm like, oh, you guys could have been at 24 hours, but you're not.
But yeah, so that was, our parents, they never really found out about that. And that was 8th grade summer, and then going into our freshman year of high school. So it took a lot of asking and convincing for Malia and I to actually be able to go to public school.
Yeah.
Because in 8th grade summer, our parents are like, I don't know if you guys should go to public school. I feel like there's a lot of, you know,
I feel like it's more exposed. Like, obviously, we were used to a charter school and being homeschooled our whole life. So we were very sheltered in that sense. Like, we didn't really know what the real world was like.
Looked like,
and I feel like going to public school for us was a culture shock, because we weren't used to, like, so many different types of people, so many different things surrounded by, you know, everything.
Yeah.
So that's a lot, especially when you aren't used to that.
Because I think most charter schools are people with strict parents.
Yeah.
And then also kids who actually like got taken out of public school.
Yeah, so like I remember a lot of kids that were in our school, either, like you were saying, they were homeschooled and kind of sheltered like us, or they got kicked out of public school. They were that bad to where only the charter schools would accept them.
Yeah, so it was like
so
there was
no in between
extremes, and we were the ones that were very sheltered, very innocent. Like we were very good kids. Like we were always really good kids.
Yeah.
And I think that our parents homeschooling us, they really built up our character. Like we really respected authority. Like we were very, I feel like, respectful kids.
Yeah.
And that's something that I want to like instill in my kids too.
Right. Me too.
But yeah, so going into 9th grade took a lot of convincing. And our parents were like, okay, well, we need to pray about it. And they prayed for months. Like, should we like let our kids go to public school?
Yeah.
And of course, like, it doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but to us, it really was. And of course, the result was not the best of us going to public school.
I mean, what they feared happened literally did happen.
Yeah.
So,
well, I remember like having a conversation with mom years after high school. Like we left public school. Mm-hmm. Mom was like, I never really thought you guys would do something that bad. Like, she was like, I didn't expect for you guys to do what you did. Right. You know what I mean?
It's funny because I feel like you can't put anything past a kid, you know?
Yeah.
Because you get around your friends, you hang around people that you shouldn't be hanging around, and then all of a sudden you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing.
And you're making bad decisions.
And that's what we found ourselves doing. It was like, I never thought that I would do, certain things, and then all of a sudden I would hang around certain people, and then you kind of feel like, oh, like, a little bit it's okay, pressured. Like I can do it too. And then you start kind of bending your morals, and then you're like, oh, well, if they did it, it's cool if I do it too.
And all of a sudden you're a completely different person and you don't see yourself the same.
Yeah.
Like it's crazy how fast that can happen.
That's why it's so important to surround yourself with good people,
Oh, for sure. And I think too, like a little disclaimer, like we are, I don't want to say I don't know. I think for Malia and I, this was a very big learning curve in our life. And maybe one of the biggest decisions, like our parents taking us out of school was probably the biggest, but also like the best decision. Although it did suck for a little bit, like Malia and I were completely isolated, and we'll get into that part, but we really had a change of heart. And I think
change of heart, and it did change our life. Like this is the beginning of how we got into social media, Yeah. And it completely started a different career path for us.
And I think too, like looking back, of course I'm a little hard on myself. Like, why did I do such stupid things?
Right.
But I was a young girl and a teenager, and I didn't know, although I did think I was grown at the time, of course. I'm like 13, 14-year-old Kenzie's like, oh, I know everything. But of course I didn't. And it bit me in the butt at the end. But yeah, so I think that's just like a little disclaimer that, obviously we don't condone any of the actions that we did at the time. And I think we definitely like regret most of the things that we did.
Yes. You know what's funny? I regret certain things that I did, but also I feel like that was kind of a canon event for us. Like that had to happen for us to really grow up and realize why it was wrong, what we did. And like, we really grew from that. Like getting taken out of school and looking back and be like, oh wow, like you can really just kind of like look back on yourself and be like, dang, like we really did those things, and like why did we do those things? And
it was honestly a big realization.
Yeah.
Especially after, I think it was sophomore or junior year. I remember sitting there and being like, I'm a completely different person than I was a year ago. And that change happened fast because we had to grow up a little bit quickly. Being in online school and working a lot. We worked at a daycare and all these other things. So that's just a little disclaimer, but let's get into like what we actually did.
So freshman year, Kenzie, Malia, we're going off first day. It was actually
young Kenzie, young Malia.
Yeah, I remember the first day. I wore an outfit, but I put another one over top of my actual outfit that I was wearing because everything like that we wanted to wear wasn't like appropriate to our parents.
Yeah.
So I would always have to like sneak wearing clothes. So I would wear like a big t-shirt over it. And then once I got to school, I'd take it off and put it in my backpack.
Yeah,
that was like the first thing that
I literally first day of school, Malia and I are walking into the bathroom to change our outfits. Like that's just not a good start.
Not a great start.
But I remember, before the first day of school, we went to the freshman orientation.
Oh,
that's where it all began. So we went to freshman orientation. We did not know a single soul at this school.
Except for our best friend.
Our childhood best friend. We kind of like the three of us navigated it together. She was homeschooled, so we were all kind of like in a little sheltered bubble.
Yeah.
And we're like, okay, we're going to take this on together.
It was nice to have each other though, because I feel like if it was just me, I would have been so scared. Like, especially a big school. I feel like I probably would have stayed like in the small school where I knew everybody.
Yeah, because I mean, there was 2,000 kids?
It was a big jump from like a couple hundred kids to 2,000 kids.
Exactly.
Like, that was insane to me.
It was very different. So we're going into freshman orientation, and somehow our people knew who we were. Like we went to school, people were like, oh my gosh, you guys are the light-skinned sisters or the light-skinned twins. We're like, okay, what kind of like name is that?
I know.
Like just off the bat, y'all are like.
Well, it was crazy too because we were like probably, I think there's maybe 20 kids
that were
Not white, yeah. So there was really no ethnicity at the school. And
so I think that's how people were like, oh, there's two girls that are not white. You know, like there's two mixed girls that are coming to school. And it was just very different because the part of town that we were in was very like more country and just very not diverse. Yeah. So that was kind of like where we grew up in, or not grew up in, we moved around a lot, but that's where we went to high school at. So.
Oh, yeah. So that's like probably going to be a whole nother episode about, I know a lot of kids there were kind of racist too. Yeah. So growing up around, or being in high school around that was tough. Just kind of like navigating all of that. But yeah.
But after freshman orientation, Malia and I, we went back home. And then we went to school. This was probably a week before school started. So we're going into the school year. We're ready. We're excited. But I think we're also a little bit nervous because obviously we didn't have really any friends coming from like small charter schools. It was just Malia and I and our childhood best friends. So we're like, okay, like I want to fit in and I want to be liked by people. Right. And I think that's such like a subconscious feeling that a lot of us have. And especially as a young teenage girl, that feeling of like, oh, I hope people like me. Like, I hope, you know, people don't think I'm weird or people don't think this about me.
Well, you want to be accepted like everywhere you go. And I feel like especially going into high school, that's what I was feeling. I was just like, dang, like what if no one likes me? Like, and I know we had each other, but it was still like, oh, it would be nice to, have you know, make friends. And like, you know, obviously we're going to a new school. So it's like, we don't know anybody. And I'm like, I want to be social. I want to have friends and I want to be liked by everyone, you know?
Yeah. So, and of course I feel like, it's so funny because growing up, that starts to kind of, I feel like once I became more secure in myself and more confident, that feeling of wanting everyone to like me kind of started to die down. Yeah. And I feel like that's a hard place to be in. But I feel like that's also like a transition into becoming like a grown up and a woman too, is like starting to come into your confidence and not caring about what everyone thinks about you.
And being secure in yourself. Like, that's really what it comes down to is like, obviously when you're a young teenage girl, I wasn't secure in myself and I wanted others to like me. And sometimes that would be me kind of not switching up, but doing something that maybe I normally wouldn't do. Right. Or, you know, compromising my morals.
Exactly. And I think that was a big switch up for us. Right. So once we were around all these people who were doing bad things, we're like, oh, well, everyone else does it, so it's okay. Yeah. And it's not. Yeah. You know, looking back, obviously, it's like, okay, well, we didn't have to go crazy. But okay, so getting into it, we were very innocent. And I think school started in August. And for the first few months, we started making friends. And obviously, you don't really know people right off the bat. Yeah. So we're like, oh my gosh, this is going to be our bestie for life. Yeah. But in reality, we weren't even friends with them after, you know,
a couple months,
like
not
starting
even
the
second semester.
We had like a completely different friend group other than like our childhood best friend.
And that's something I told Michaela too, like going into high school. I was like, you are not going to be friends with the people you're not going to be friends with the girls and guys that you met, you know, the first semester of high school. Like even freshman year, like I think people have their little friends and then they end up kind of figuring out who they actually want to hang out with, who they actually like. And, you know, but that's so true too. Like you do realize how people are, because some people can be fake to you and, you know, want to be friends with you for certain reasons. And then you kind of figure them out. You're like, okay, this person's not that good. Like, let me just, you know, distance myself.
Exactly. But I think that's hard as a kid. You don't really know. You want to think the best of everybody. Right. I feel like I was very naive in that way of like, oh my gosh, everyone is so nice and everyone wants the best for me and I want the best for everyone else. And that's like a very, I feel like, naive way to think about. Yeah. And once you kind of start, you know, taking on life a little bit more, you start to realize that might not be everyone's
and not everyone's like that.
Exactly. Yeah. So we had like a little group of friends and I think it was
September. Yeah, it was going into our birthdays. Our parents threw us a little party and they were super sweet and we kind of took advantage of that. But anyways, we went to the mall with our friends. They bought us cheesecake. We did all these fun things.
We had a little sleepover party.
We had a little sleepover with all of our girlfriends and it was super fun. And then us being us, we were like, oh, you know, apparently that wasn't enough for us. So we were just
let's disrespect them. No, I'm just kidding.
No, but we were like, oh, you know, let's go sneak out and like have more fun when we could have just ended the night there. Like,
and it would have been amazing.
It would have been great because it was already fun and yeah, it's funny because I was like, oh my gosh, like our parents did so much. They literally like, they bought us a cheesecake. Like they drove all of our friends because none of us could drive either. So we all drove to the mall and all of that. But yeah, that night we decided to sneak out to one of our friends' house, and we went over to her house, and I think there was guys there.
Yeah.
And we were all just kind of like,
it was just kind of like a little like kickback. We were all hanging out.
Yeah.
But I think we ended up like drinking. And that was our first time ever like actually drinking
like trying alcohol. I remember I didn't even like it. I was just like, what the heck is this?
Yeah. And that's kind of like where we started like trying different things. That was like the first instance of us like, because we were again very sheltered and we had never really had an opportunity to try anything like that before.
Right.
So we went over to our friend's house and we ended up like drinking and hanging out with like this little group of friends. There was probably like 6 or 7 of us.
Typical like sneaking out stuff. Like we were doing ding dong ditching and all of that. But we ended up staying out to like 5 a.m. But I remember we were walking back home and it was weird. This like huge owl like swooped over our heads. I remember that. It was so weird.
Yeah.
And then I was like, Makenzie and I were like goofing off talking about the night. And then I was laughing and I was like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if, Dad was sitting right there? And then we got closer.
Ha, ha, ha. Yeah,
that's hilarious. But not actually. And then
it wasn't funny.
And then we got a little closer and I tapped Kenzie on the shoulder. I was like, wait, I see a little shadow of my dad on the front porch. And I was like, there's no way. So we walk up there and he's like, good morning. And we were like, oh, like this is where we done goofed. We were so scared.
I was so like terrified, like because we were a little drunk at that point too, and also just scared because our dad is sitting there at 5 a.m.
Right,
guys. Our dog snitched on us. He barked at 11 o'clock when we went out that night.
Yeah.
And our parents heard it, and they were waiting from 11 o'clock at night to 5 a.m. for us to come back home.
The crazy part is we got away with sneaking out like a few times before that.
Yeah. So we thought we were chilling,
and we would normally leave a little bit later than 11, but that night we were like, oh, let's just leave at 11. It's fine.
Of course, we thought that.
That bit us in the butt.
I remember walking and seeing our dad. He goes, good morning. Write down the password to your phone. Go to bed. We have church in the morning. That's all he said.
Yeah. So we wrote down our passwords to our phone, gave him our phones, and then we went to bed.
And I knew, I was like, there is some stuff on this phone that could get us in trouble because we had recorded probably us drinking or whatever that night. Like,
and that's something that we always did too. We'd always have evidence of like what we were doing. So if we got caught, it was already, filmed or something.
Yeah.
So we were stupid in that way because we were just like, oh, it's fine. They won't see it.
Exactly. But remember how we said we weren't allowed to have Snapchat? We had that second account, but I logged out of it. So I'm like, okay, we'll be fine.
We both did.
We'll be fine. They're not going to actually see like, anything we recorded on that Snapchat account because we didn't have it.
But also we grabbed our home phone, called our best friend and was like,
in the middle of the night
because she wasn't even there. We were like, hey, we need your help. So she was a G, and she literally logged into both of our Snapchats, deleted any kind of evidence that could have been that they could have seen. And yeah, I can't believe she did that, but that was a reoccurring thing. We'd always call her up and be like, hey, you need to delete everything right now.
Or we would just tell her like, could you change our password? Because if she changed our password, it would log us out of our account.
Yeah.
So we got pretty good at being sneaky.
Yeah.
Like we just got gradually better at it.
The crazy thing is too, I feel like that's one thing. When your parents are super strict, it raises super sneaky kids. If they're wanting to rebel,
Right. If they're just like, because I think our siblings now, they know not to act up because of what we went through.
Well, they saw what would happen if they did.
Guys, the funny thing is, our parents told us, if public school is not good for you guys and you guys start acting a fool, we're going to take you out of school.
They told us before we went to school. We already knew the consequences. So that made me more sneaky and kind of more aware of what we were doing. So I'm like, I remember telling Kenzie this, but anytime like we wanted to do something, Kenzie was like, oh, let's just do it. And I'm like, no, we can do it, but we need a plan. Like if this goes wrong, we can do this. And if they find this, like we have to do this. And Kenzie's like, no, I don't care.
Yeah,
like,
Malia had like a methodical plan throughout everything that we like ever wanted to do that was bad.
Because I knew if one little slip up, we were done. We were going to be taken out of school.
And for some reason, I did not care. I don't know. I think there was a little part of me that was like, a little bit mad at mom and dad. And I think it was almost subconscious of like how strict they were. Right. Because when all of your friends are allowed to do whatever they want, and then you're the only one that can't go over to the sleepover, you can't go over to your friend's house, you can't have a phone, you can't have social media. Like, it was all these things, and I was like, oh, well, we can't do anything. And like, we can't go anywhere. We can't go to the mall with our friends.
You feel left out. Like,
you do.
All your friends are allowed to do all these things, and they're all hanging out together, and then you're the odd one out that's like, oh, I can't go. Like, you know.
Yeah, and I think that there was a little part of me that was like mad at mom and dad, and I was like, I don't care what the consequences are. I'm gonna do whatever I want because I've never done what I have wanted to do before. And that is terrible.
Yeah,
like that is it's so funny because I'm so different now. Like, I'm very I feel like thoughtful about how my actions affect others, but being so selfish to the point where you don't care how your actions affect other people is terrible.
Yeah.
That's a terrible place to be at, because for one, you're going to get yourself in trouble, and you hurt the people that you genuinely care about and love. Like, that's awful.
Well,
like,
and something that we didn't realize, and we started to realize after the year was over, but your actions really do affect other people. Yeah. Whether it's your parents, your friends, yourself. And it can get you into trouble. It can get you into danger.
Yeah.
So that's something that we kind of found out.
Learned.
But after, after our parents got our phones, we were grounded from.
Do you remember that morning?
Oh, yeah.
We get ready for church, or I get ready for church, and Malia's like, my stomach hurts. I don't want to go to church. And my dad's like, why does your stomach hurt?
And I was like, I don't know. I ate a lot of food last night.
You're like, I had a lot of snacks.
And my dad goes, we're going to church.
Get ready. So obviously we go to church and we get ready. But that night when we come home, they're like, Malia and Makenzie, you are grounded for the rest of the year. So we were grounded for the rest of the year.
So we were grounded all the way up until January. I remember there was homecoming shortly after our birthdays, and we couldn't even go.
Yeah. Well, our birthdays had just passed.
Yeah.
So it was like homecoming, football games. We couldn't really go to anything because we done goofed.
Yeah.
Like,
I remember I think we maybe went to like 2 football games, and then we got grounded.
Yeah. So I think Malia, they took your phone.
Yeah.
So we both didn't have phones anymore. Did I ever have a phone? I don't think I had a phone.
I don't think you did, because I remember I saved up for a phone for freshman year.
Yeah.
And then they paid for my service. That was the only time they actually paid for my service. Yeah. And then after that, I had to pay for it.
Because I think they did think, like, if you're going to a big school, it is a smart idea to have a way to contact us, which I think is true.
Be able to communicate with them.
Yeah. So obviously we both didn't need phones, but Malia got one.
Yeah. So then
us little grounded.
So when we were grounded, that means no phones, no social media, no nothing. And our parents were already strict as is with social media.
Yeah.
So
we weren't allowed to hang out with friends at all. So, like, we weren't allowed to do anything but school and basketball. So we were playing basketball at the time.
I'm actually surprised that we were allowed to do basketball, too.
Me too.
But that was already a commitment that we had. So our parents were like, obviously, you're going to do that. And then school. And then we come back home. That's it. We weren't allowed to do anything else. No social media. But since we couldn't do social media, I was like, oh, let me get my little sister's Kindle. And I thought this was a great idea because no one had used the Kindle. Like, it was literally like one of those tablets where no one used it, and Michaela didn't use it either. So I was
like, a Kindle for reading, and like no one ever read on it.
Yeah, so it was literally like in the bottom of a drawer, and I found it, and I was like, oh, this will be great. So
this will be great. Yeah.
So I get on the Kindle and I downloaded Instagram. I didn't even know you could download Instagram on a Kindle. It was like a Kindle Fire, like the little tablet ones. But I downloaded Instagram, logged into my account, and I just used it so I could like go on there and just, have some kind of social media because I was a fiend for it.
You were addicted at that point.
Yeah, I was addicted. I still am, but but yeah, so I used the tablet and I would just like hide it in my closet. And so one day I went to school. This is so funny. So one day I go to school and my dad went to our room and found the Kindle, and he went onto it and saw that I had Instagram.
And I had Instagram on there too.
Yeah. So he hacked our Instagram while we were in school, posted a selfie like this with little like peace signs with a duck face saying #daddy's girl, I love my dad. Then he posts the second picture was Kenzie and I at 8th grade graduation looking treacherous. Like, we looked terrible, smiling with our dad. And the caption was also #daddy's girl, I love my dad. So I didn't see this because I didn't have a phone, but I remember I was leaving my 4th period going to lunch. And some random guy, like in the distance, I remember in the hallway.
He was like in junior year or something. Like we had no idea who he was.
I remember this, but so I was coming out of my 4th period class, and some random guy yells out #daddy's girl, and I was like, what the heck is going on?
What does that mean?
Yeah, and like a few people were looking at me weird, and I was like, what the heck? Like, I don't know what's going on. So I remember going to the lunch table, and I was talking to my friend. I was like, what's going on? Like, everything's weird. And she was like, did you not see your Instagram? I'm like, what do you mean? I don't have my phone. So like, how could I have seen my Instagram? So she pulls up her Instagram account and shows me my account, and I see both the pictures of my dad and the #daddy's girl, I love my dad. And I was like, he did what? And right then and there, I knew he hacked my account, obviously. And I was like, oh, we're screwed.
Yeah. Like, because when we get home, like, what the heck is going to happen?
We were done.
Well, I thought it was like a little funny. Like, I thought it was.
I laughed for a second, and then I was like, oh, no, we're screwed.
Yeah, no, this is not actually funny. But everyone else thought it was hilarious.
Yeah.
And I remember like all the comments were like #daddy's girl. Like everyone from school was like getting
started commenting on
kick
it.
out of it.
Yeah.
I'm like, so this is funny for y'all. This is entertainment.
Yeah. But dude, I'm looking back on it now, I'm like, my dad's iconic for that. Like if my kids ever did that, I'm like, I'm so doing that. That's so funny.
But so he changed the password. To this day, we can't take down the account.
Yeah, because I remember as soon as he did that, I was like, oh, I asked for my friend's phone to try to like log in and try to like delete all the pictures. But he logged me out and changed the email. So I couldn't even log into my own account. And I tried so many times, and I literally got both of us blocked out to where we couldn't go back in and like take anything down. So that account's still there.
It's a private account, so y'all will never find it. Like, good luck if you do, but you'll never find it. But like our friends can still see the comments and still go through that account. Like that's crazy. That's actually wild. And he deleted all of our pictures. Do you remember that?
He deleted all of our like previous Instagram pictures.
He cleared our feed, and then the only thing on our Instagram accounts were 2 pictures. The one of the 3 of us together and one of him with duck lips. So that was like it. That was the only thing on that account.
Oh my gosh.
But basically, when we got home, everything went downhill.
I remember my dad was so pissed. Like I actually haven't seen him that mad ever.
Because I'm usually more scared of mom.
Mm-hmm. Like, no. Because when our mom's scary, it's like she has a valid reason. Well, I feel like when both of our parents were scary, they did have a valid reason to be angry.
Yeah.
But
mom was just like, she fierce.
Like you just felt it. Like even if you didn't know what was happening, like the whole house felt it.
Yeah.
But I remember my dad, I've never seen him that angry before in my life. And he was so pissed at us. He was like, why do you need to go on the Kindle and download Instagram when you were grounded? Like you guys are almost ungrounded, and now you just screwed it up for yourself, and we were grounded for even longer. We extended our grounding.
Yeah, so I think that was in like November, because we were supposed to get ungrounded January 1st. So we had a month left. But
we screwed it up again.
We screwed it up again. So yeah, so then we were grounded, I think for the rest of the school year.
Pretty much, yeah. And I remember our dad actually threatened to kick us out of the house.
Oh yeah, I remember
we came home and he was like, since you guys want to act like adults, you guys can
adults.
You guys are adults and you can go out and do whatever you want, but you're not going to be here. So he basically threatened to kick us out, and we were like, oh, we'll just, stay with one of our friends.
No, so this is literally what happened. I remember like word for word. He's like, since y'all think you're adults now, go ahead and act like adults. And we took that pretty seriously.
Yeah, we
were
did.
Like, okay.
So Kenzie and I were like,
he basically said, he was like, okay, what was it like? Not this isn't your home, but like.
Well, yeah, he said if we wanted to be adults, then we had to leave. And so we were like, okay, that's fine with us. We'll be adults and do whatever we want. That's what we thought.
And Malia and I were like, let's get a game plan.
So we started scheming. We had one of our friends, and he said we could stay at his house.
And his mom said we could stay at his house.
And they were both cool with it. So we're like, so I told my dad, I was like, okay, well, we found a place to stay. And then
let's start packing.
And then
up our
Kenzie
things.
and I were like, there was actually, was it homecoming or was there football?
Homecoming football game.
Yeah, it was a homecoming football game. And we're like, oh, we can go to that since we're ungrounded and we're adults and we can do what we want. Quote unquote. So I remember Makenzie called our friend's mom and made sure that like she could pick us up and everything. And then she said that she was like, oh, aren't you guys grounded? Like,
yeah, okay, so basically what I did, I called my friend and I'm like, hey, we're ungrounded. because she knew everyone knew we were grounded. We weren't allowed to do anything. Like, everyone knew we were grounded. So I'm like, hey, you want to go to the football game tonight? She's like, wait, you can go? And I'm like, yeah, we can go. We're ungrounded. Our dad's actually kicking us out of the house. But anyways, so I'm like, yeah, is there any way like your mom could come pick us up? And she's like, oh yeah, let me ask her really quick. Meanwhile, we lived so close to the school, we could have walked. Like, we could have walked to the football game. Anyways, that's beside the point. Okay, so she's like, yeah, let me ask my mom. I'll call you back. She doesn't end up calling us back. Her mom calls our mom. And then our mom's like, why the heck do you guys think you're ungrounded? You're not going to the football game. And I'm like, well, Dad said we're adults and that we can't live with you guys anymore. And so we're gonna do, what we want now because we're adults and we found a place to stay. And they're like, yeah, that's not actually happening. You're still living here.
I don't know what your father said, but you're still grounded.
You're still grounded. So yeah, we were humbled that day. We were humbled a lot.
I was very sad. I was like, dang. Like,
we really thought we were gonna go see a football game.
Yeah.
For real. Yeah.
So yeah, we were grounded for like pretty much the rest of the school year.
And that was in November. So
yeah,
we were
that was so early on.
Yeah,
like that was so unnecessary.
Yeah, so
like everything.
Oh my gosh, that's terrible.
It's crazy too, because like I'm surprised we got away with a lot of things at school too.
Yeah, that our parents never really knew about.
Mm-hmm. Not until later, but I'm like our parents always found out the stuff that we did, but never the school.
So like we never got in trouble with the school.
Yeah,
because I know a lot of our friends did. Like, they would get suspended for, like, vaping in the bathrooms or, having some type of, like, thing that they shouldn't have had on them.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, okay, here's the thing. Freaking vaping is an epidemic. I know that people talk about this for real, but, like, it is highly addictive.
Yeah.
And I think one thing I'm very grateful for is, like, if we never got taken out of school, I don't think I ever would have quit.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, it's hard.
I remember during school, that's kind of, like, when we started trying things. And I couldn't stop on my own. Like, it wasn't even like that far into vaping. And I remember it was really hard to stop.
Yeah.
And that stuff is really addicting. Like, more than anything else, I felt like.
Yeah, I was like, I mean, more than anything else, we didn't really do any other things other than like drinking. But like,
yeah. Or like smoking. But
yeah, that was it. But I mean, I remember trying to quit by myself throughout the year. I was like, this is not a good habit to be in. And I kind of like realized that by myself that I was addicted to this thing. And I'm like, okay, well, I need to stop. And I literally couldn't because everyone around you, everyone has a vape. They're like, hey, you want to hit this in the bathroom? Hey.
Yeah. And Kenzie and I were fiends too. I feel like we were like 0 to 100
on everything.
And like we'd be doing it all day. Like we'd go to a room, close the door,
hit our vape.
Yeah. For the rest of the night.
Yeah. And I'm like, that is terrible. So I'm glad that once we did get taken out of school, I just went cold turkey.
Yeah.
And that's kind of hard to do, especially if you've been doing it. I mean, I think we were only doing it for like 6 months at that point. But imagine if you were like 3 years in or something vaping and then you try to quit. Like there are withdrawals.
It's hard. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a terrible habit to be in.
But yeah, like we never, like the school never really caught us doing anything like that, which I was surprised. I was like, dang, like how did we not get suspended or anything like that?
Yeah.
Although we did have Saturday school for switching classes.
Oh, that's a different story.
I know some of you guys maybe know that story, but yeah, that was funny.
Yeah.
That was a funny little story.
So then basically, I mean, there were a few things that happened, but nothing that we really got in trouble for.
Right.
I think the next thing that we got in trouble for was
yeah, so this story
this is a tough one.
Not very proud of at all. But this was actually, I feel like I must have been ungrounded like recently because we were allowed to hang out with friends.
So we must have been ungrounded in April.
So like we were probably ungrounded for a few months. And then we had to go in and screw it up again. This was just kind of, a constant theme in this story. But anyways, I remember a lot of my friends and people that I surround myself with would like constantly steal things. And I don't know why, because I remember we grew up in a very like...
People had money.
It was a wealthier area. So a lot of people, their parents would give them whatever they wanted and they would have money. And that was, that was never the case for Kenzie and I. Like we always had to work hard for what we had. And I'm so grateful for that. But like, I remember I was not like, I didn't have money to spend on,
whatever.
Little things.
Yeah. Not that makes this okay.
Obviously that does not.
Yeah.
This is just like a little backstory, but definitely does not make it okay whatever circumstance you're in.
But basically everyone at school would steal stuff all the time.
Right, yeah. So. And this was another thing too of just like the people you hang around. It's so important to surround yourself with good people because I never thought I would do something like this, but this just goes to show you that because I surrounded myself with people like that, I was like, oh, it's okay. Like, let me do it. Let me try
Everyone else
Let me try it once. Everyone else is doing it. So anyways, we were going to have a sleepover at my friend's house and we were going to watch a movie at the mall. And we were like, my friend and I were like, oh, let's go and get snacks at Target. So we went to go get snacks from Target. And of course, I see a swimsuit that I need. And I was like, I need this swimsuit right now. And I didn't have any money for it. I only had money for, you know, snacks. Maybe $10 worth of candy. But that obviously wasn't going to buy a swimsuit. So I thought I could steal the swimsuit. And I did. And I put it in my sleepover bag. And as we were walking out of the store, the Target security somehow like cuts in front of me and he goes, Target security, you're going to have to come with me. And I was like, oh no, because no one that I knew ever got caught. I was just like, oh, it's so easy. Like, and all of a sudden he's telling me I have to go to the security room. And yeah, so I got caught stealing and they had to call my parents and everything. And
this is like a little bit of a backstory, but I remember our parents, they got the call and they probably thought that like Malia, like something terrible happened to Malia because the officer is like, hey, are you the parent of Malia, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And he's like, yes. Is she like, okay? Like they probably thought that like you were in like a car accident and something like terrible happened to you. Like things like when you start making bad decisions, things can escalate quickly and things can go really bad. So it's like, even like messing around with things that you maybe don't think are a huge deal can start leading into like worse and worse things.
Right.
And it is progressive, you know?
Yeah.
So that was scary for our parents, I'm sure. Like, oh my gosh, is my daughter like alive and well? Like what the heck is going on? So yeah, they came to pick up Malia. I remember me and my two other friends are sitting in the Target parking lot crying and praying. We're like, oh my gosh, is she okay? And then, yeah, our parents took Malia and I home.
Yeah, that was the most awkwardest, probably worst car ride I've ever experienced.
Because they brought our younger siblings.
They brought our younger siblings. They were sitting in the back while both my parents were like, what the heck were you thinking? Like, you know, all of this grilling us and just asking me questions. Obviously, as they should, because they were like, okay, why are you stealing? Yeah. What was the reason? And then I remember them asking too, like, oh, like, whose idea was this? And I was like, oh, it was mine. Like, obviously, I didn't want to get my friend in trouble either, but we both wanted to do it. Yeah. So it was like, you know, but
if anything, yeah.
But yeah, that was that. And I was grounded for the rest of the school year, actually. So yeah. I actually had to quit basketball, which we
were in off-season club training.
Yeah.
So we were starting to get into off-season. So we weren't actually in like the school season that had already passed.
That had passed, but then there was the club basketball, which we actually did we actually got scholarships for.
Because we couldn't afford basketball. It was like $200 for like a couple months of basketball. And we're like, we can't afford that.
Right.
Like, so we actually ended up qualifying for a scholarship through our coach, which was like the biggest blessing.
Yeah.
But of course, us being stupid, we screwed it up. Yeah.
But I remember my parents had told me that part of my punishment was to tell my coaches like what I did, and then that I couldn't play for the rest of the season. And so I remember we went to Dunkin' Donuts and met up with my coach. Dude, I loved all of our coaches too. They were all so sweet. And this was really hard for me to tell them. But I was like, honestly, I just have to do it because...
Bawling your eyes out.
Yeah. But I did feel really bad. And I told my coaches what happened. And they were obviously like super disappointed in me. But I remember them too saying that like, obviously everyone's, you know, goofs up and everything. But...
Well, people make mistakes. And I think that like that... We learned a lot from this season in our life. Mm-hmm. And if I could go back in time, I probably wouldn't do some things that I did. I'm going to be honest. Like,
yeah,
I think the worst part of all of it is seeing people you love being disappointed in you.
Right.
Like the coaches, like our basketball coaches, like who we like really looked up to. Mm-hmm. Like seeing their face when you told them like you did something terrible, they're like, dang, like I never expected that out of you.
And the fact that they gave us a scholarship too, like that must have been even worse, you know? I mean, that was, I already felt so bad just because of that. And obviously, like I was very remorseful and sad that I did something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I told my coaches, couldn't play basketball anymore, which sucked because Kenzie, there was a tournament in Vegas and I couldn't go to that. So like the whole team was going, it was going to be a fun trip. And there's also, you know, games to play in Vegas and I couldn't go. And I remember begging my parents to go and they're like, nope, you're grounded. Like
you're not in basketball anymore.
You already ruined this for yourself. And I was like, yeah, you're right. So I couldn't go.
That was one thing about our parents. Like if they said something, they stuck to it.
Yeah.
They stuck to it and we knew that. Versus like our other friends' parents, they'd be like, you're grounded for a week. And then the next day they'd be on their phone and they'd be able to hang out with friends.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what the heck is the definition of grounding to y'all? Because to us, like we weren't allowed to do anything when we were grounded.
It was like hibernation. So we were.
For good reason. Like I feel like we learned our lesson after being grounded time after time after time and again. Like it took a while, but we finally came around. So this is the last little portion of the story. So Malia is grounded in April. And I have a basketball tournament in Vegas. You know, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Supposedly.
But that actually did not happen. That's not the case in this story. It came back to Arizona to haunt me. So basically, bro, oh my gosh. Okay, so Malia, obviously, she was grounded. She didn't come on the Vegas trip. But me, my childhood best friend, and her parents, they took us to Vegas because our parents, they had to work and they couldn't take time off. So a lot of the times it would be, you know, us going on, like if we had a basketball trip, I know our friend had a volleyball trip one time that we went with her and we'd go with her parents. Her parents were like a second family to us.
Yeah.
Like they really took care of us and were able to like take us to basketball practices or, you know, they were just always there. So they took us to this basketball tournament in Vegas and me and my friend end up bringing marijuana to smoke. And I remember, I think we had already played one of our games. So I think it was a 2 or 3 day tournament. So we might've been like one night into it. And I remember we ended up smoking and I think we ordered like 40 chicken McNuggets on Uber Eats. Sorry, that's not funny. That's not funny. Okay. Anyways, so basically we ended up playing in the basketball tournament. I just want to let y'all know I did terrible in that basketball tournament because basically it was like all the girls basketball team, varsity included, and we were a freshman at the time, everyone playing on the same team. So I basically got no minutes. But I remember I got in for one singular minute and this girl on varsity, like she's a senior, she passes me the ball and I'm like, wait, why would she pass me the ball? I don't do anything here. So I just turned my head and I think she's passing it to somebody else.
When in reality, ducked. Didn't you duck under the ball?
I ducked under the ball. Like, that is terrible.
That's wild.
That's like actually super embarrassing because the one moment that someone had given me the ball, this could have been my moment to, you know, shoot it, you know, pass it to somebody else, do something. But no, I duck under the ball. And my coach immediately takes me out of the game. He's like, you're done.
As you should, honestly.
Would have done the same thing. Yeah. So yeah, that happens. Anyways, the trip ended and it was all, you know, fine and dandy until we get home. So I get home and y'all remember how I was grounded? You know, reoccurring thing here. I was always grounded.
And you didn't have a phone.
I didn't have a phone and I wasn't allowed to have a phone. But my friend, my childhood best friend, had a burner phone because her parents were also pretty strict. So like she had this phone that she didn't use unless she was grounded. So she gave it to me. She was like, hey, like I know you don't have a phone, so here's this burner phone. Me at 14 having a burner phone is a little crazy.
Yeah.
Anyways, so I have this phone. I have Instagram downloaded on it, Snapchat downloaded on it, all this stuff. And again, we aren't allowed to have any type of social media. So just keep that in the back of your mind because I go into the shower one day. This might have been 2 days after I get back from Vegas. So this was in May.
Well, before you say this, when I think there was a car ride where I think it was like close to the end of school.
Oh, you're right.
And Makenzie was in the front seat. She has the burner phone in her pocket and somehow it falls out. And our dad sees it and he goes, what the heck is that? And Makenzie goes, oh, it's my friend's phone. I was just holding it for her. And my dad knew. He was like, that's BS. Like, obviously something's up.
I'm surprised he didn't snatch it right then and there and say, what's the password?
But he was waiting.
Yeah, he was waiting for a good old moment. So this was the good old moment. I'm in the shower. And after I get done with my shower, I'm charging my phone. And it's in my room. And I see my dad in my room when I come out of the shower. And he's like, what the heck is this? And I was like, it's my friend's phone. And he's like, give me the password to your friend's phone if it's really your friend's phone. And I'm like, I don't know the password. And he's like, Makenzie, what's the password to this phone? You have 5 minutes to figure it out. So I'm like, okay.
So she's like stalling, calling our friend.
So I'm like, okay, I get the home phone and I call this childhood best friend, bro. She was always there for real. So I call her and I'm like, hey, what's the password to this phone? And I'm like, delete everything on Instagram. So yeah, she ends up like logging out of my Instagram account and my Snapchat account. So she changes the password. So I end up telling my dad the password to the phone. He takes it. He goes through everything. And it was hours. Malia and I are just sitting in our room. And finally it gets to like 7 o'clock at night. And our parents are like, we're going to interrogate both of you separately.
That scared me so bad.
Honestly, I was like, wait, separately? Like, Malia and I obviously do everything together. So we're like, y'all aren't going to like... They wanted to make sure we weren't lying.
Yeah.
Because obviously, if we're not telling the same story, then one of us is lying. Something's up.
Right.
So this is like literally 2 days after I get back from Vegas. And I was so nervous because I knew that our friend had logged out of my Instagram and my Snapchat. So I'm like, what could they have really like found?
Right.
So I go into their room. Of course, I'm first. Yeah. My dad looks at me and he's like, so, your friend was still logged in to her Snapchat and her Instagram. So I actually saw all of her stuff on the phone. And I'm like, like I knew that there was, you know, obviously stuff that we did in Vegas on that phone on her accounts.
Right.
So it was actually an Instagram DM between her and a different basketball girl that said that we had smoked in Vegas. So that's how they knew that happened. Even though we tried our best to hide it, the truth came out in the end. And so basically, he told me that. And then I in that moment, like, there was literally a flip of a switch. Like, I just started bawling. And I think it was because of how much we lied to mom and dad. Mm-hmm. Like, there was just so much built up emotions and, like, honestly, like, sadness for me. Mm-hmm. Like, we had lied to them for a whole year about, like, everything we were doing.
Yeah. And I once you start lying, too, it's like you lie once and then you have to lie to cover up that lie. And then you lie to cover up that lie. And it's like a continual thing. And it was, like Kenzie was saying, we lied to them the entire year about
where we were going, what we were doing, who we were with. And I think in that moment, once they started questioning me, I guess that wall that I had built up just, like, broke down. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I actually do feel bad about all this. And, like, I love my parents. And I have been acting crazy this whole year and not regarding anybody else but myself.
Yeah.
And I just apparently didn't care about anybody else, literally but myself. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, when they started questioning me and, like, interrogating me, I just told them, like, pretty much everything. Mm-hmm. Like, I told them a lot of stuff that they would have probably never found out about. But I honestly, like, there was a true change of heart where I was like, okay, I've been lying to my parents this whole time. Because I knew it was over.
Yeah.
I knew that there was no coming back.
Might as well come clean.
Might as well just come clean. And I was like, okay, if I lie now, I'm never going to end this cycle of lying. And that's what I knew in that moment. I was like, if I'm trying to cover my booty right now, I'm going to keep trying to cover my booty for the rest of my life. Right. Like, we're never going to break this if I just don't do it now.
Yeah.
Because they had already found out a lot of stuff that we would have I knew they would have taken it out of school. Mm-hmm. After the smoking thing, they were like, yeah,
it's time
to go.
You're
done.
And I remember Makenzie coming out, she was sobbing and I was waiting because it was my turn to go in their room. And she was like, I told them everything. And I look at her and I was like, everything?
She's like, what the heck do you mean everything? And I'm sure you had a similar experience when you went in there.
No, and even before that too, because I remember I remember in high school too, I was like a little bit depressed, but also lying to my parents over and over again really got to me. I felt relieved after telling them everything just because it was a clean slate.
Yeah.
And we could kind of start over with our parents. Obviously,
it took so
long because I remember even too, like, after we had changed, obviously it takes a while to show that you have changed and it takes time. But like, I remember our dad would always be like, oh, like we'd go to the gym and he'd be like, oh, are you guys like
smoking weed at the
smoke
gym?
Weed? And obviously, like, who could blame him? Like, we would literally, do that stuff all the time and just lie to our parents. So it took them time to obviously, gain that trust back. But yeah, it was.
Yeah, it did. It took a while. And I think when you break trust, to rebuild it takes double the amount of time, 10 times the amount of time it took you to break it. It's easy to break trust. Right. But building it back up is really difficult. And both parties have to be able and willing to do that. And I feel like we were very lucky too, because our parents, of course, they did know we were kids. And I feel like, yes, it was a little harsh, like taking us out of school. But I think at the same time, our parents didn't know what we would be doing if we were still going to public school. Like, okay, yes, this is bad, but could it get worse? And I think it could have.
Yeah. And I mean, we could have stayed down the same road of like, we could have kept rebelling, we could have kept lying, but the fact that we didn't was, they saw that eventually.
Yeah.
Like down the road, they saw that we actually did have a change of heart. And
also, our parents are very genuine and authentic people, and they can spot BS from a mile away.
Right. I mean, they always knew when we were BSing. I was like, yeah, like they always knew. And even if they didn't know, they somehow stumbled across it. Like, I remember my mom saying like she was never trying to like look for things and bad things that we were doing, but somehow she always found it. I was like, dang, we just must be terrible at trying to hide stuff apparently, because we got caught every single time.
Yeah.
But I remember too, our friends' parents were really kind of naive because we would get away with everything at our parents' house. And I don't know if it was just they didn't care or they just never like really noticed, but like we would get away with everything.
And then we would be like, okay, well, we're not doing this at our house, but at your parents' house, maybe we could get away with some things,
right?
Yeah. Because that's another reason why parents are like, oh, maybe I don't want you having sleepovers at someone's house because you don't know the people's parents.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like, obviously
it makes sense.
It makes sense. And I think now as, a 19-year-old versus my 14-year-old self, 5 years ago, it's so funny because it feels like it was longer.
I know.
It feels like a long time ago. Like 14 years old was not that long ago.
I remember the worst part about this whole thing was like telling my younger siblings. Ooh. Because I remember my brother and sister obviously saw that Kenzie and I were crying, and
we got in trouble.
We got in trouble so many times, but also like they knew that we were getting taken out of school, and they were like, I remember my brother asking, he was like, oh, like, why'd you guys get taken out of school? And then I told him, and he was like, you guys did what? And I remember I was so sad because I was like, dang, like I'm the older sister.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to be the one that sets an example for my younger siblings, and I didn't do that.
Yeah.
And if anything too, I feel like I'm sure a lot of younger siblings might be able to relate, but they always kind of look up to their siblings, but they kind of take notes. Like they know what to do, what not to do, because they've seen you grow up and like how our parents would parent us.
Yeah.
And like, they know now, okay, I can get away with this. I can't get away with it. Like they learn quickly because we're kind of like the test dummies, Yeah. Whereas like, we don't know what we can and can't get away with. And
so we have to see what that looks like.
Right.
But it's funny because our younger siblings are so different than us.
Yeah.
Like I feel like also our parents aren't as strict on them, but also they're really good kids and they don't do anything bad. So it's like, it's so like cool seeing their relationship, Max and Michaela's, with our parents, because I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is almost what it would have been like if we never, if we never got into the trouble that we got into.
Right.
Because it did. So yes, we were kind of rebelling for, I feel like, a good year. It was a year in high school, and then sophomore, junior, and senior year, we did online school. So that was our punishment.
Yeah.
It was, you're not going back to public school. Obviously, this is not a good environment for you. And that was a really good realization, because it wasn't. It was not a good environment for us, honestly. I feel like, for one, the people we were surrounding ourselves with were bad influences. And also too, like, we weren't really progressing towards anything good in life. And like, once we got taken out of school, we did a 180 switch. We started working. I remember we got our first job at a daycare. We were 14 and 15, or we were turning 15 and 16.
15 and 16, yeah.
And we worked there for 2 years. We had a great job there. We made a really good impression, I feel like, on the staff there. And we loved it there.
And then we just, like, we got to focus on school, too. And that's actually when we started social media. Like, I feel like if we stayed in public school, I would have never done social media. I would have cared way too much about what my classmates think about me. And that's something that I don't think I would ever get into.
I think that is such a big thing, though, is like when you care so much about what other people think about you, it really does affect your decisions.
Yeah.
Like, we would have never started social media.
Right.
Or if we did, we wouldn't have posted the type of content that we posted because people would be like, oh my gosh, TikTok is so cringy.
Right.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Like, I think we were just scared of what other people thought about us. And too, like, once we left school, we stopped doing everything bad that we were doing.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't, I didn't have any, like, alcohol or any type.
We didn't have the desire to do those things anymore. I felt like we had to grow up quickly, but in a good way.
In a good way.
Like, we started working. We were really focusing on school. Like,
the gym.
We would go to the gym, like, literally 2 hours a day. Like, also, too, we were grounded at the time, so we really had nothing else to do. But
I think that moment, we had a good 2 years where we were completely isolated. Like, yes, we did some bad things and we were learning our lesson, but us being alone for 2 years was very depressing. We weren't allowed to have friends. We were doing online school. We didn't see anybody our age for years.
Depressing, like, but I think it was necessary at the same time.
Yes.
Because we learned how to be alone and, like, be productive during those times because it was so lonely. I'm glad that I did have you.
Yeah.
Because if I was just by myself, like, that would be even harder. But I just remember it really did suck because not being around kids your own age, not having any sort of social outlet, that's hard. Like,
it is, yeah.
That was one of the hardest things, like, that we had to go through and learn. But I felt like it made me so independent now, and that's not something that I necessarily, like, need. And also, too, I think we realized that most of our friendships there weren't good.
They weren't real friendships.
They weren't real friendships. I mean, the people there were not good influences. They weren't good people. We only had really two good best friends from school.
We kept in contact with our good friends that we genuinely cared about and really loved. We kept in contact with them.
Right.
You know, once we got ungrounded.
Yeah.
You know, senior year, junior year, we were like, hey, like, you guys want to hang out?
Yeah.
And we didn't need to be in school to hang out with the people that we genuinely liked.
Right.
Like, 2 people out of 2,000 that we genuinely had a good relationship with.
Yeah.
And, like, our childhood best friend, of course. Like, we're still friends with her to this day.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think it's when you're taken out of that type of setting, you start to realize that you're not really missing out, and you can take notes and you can start learning what's really valuable in life. What do I really want out of life? And you're not distracted by everything that people are telling you. You know what I mean? I feel like that can really get to your head, especially as a young girl.
Yeah.
You're easily influenced. It's just what it is, you know?
And I remember, too, I did feel left out for a while. And I remember we went back to, I think it was sophomore year. Like, we went to a football game.
Oh, we were
our parents did let us go to a football game. And no one said hi. Like, I remember Kenzie and I were like, oh my gosh, like, let's go say hi to all of our old friends. And, like, it was like we had never gone to the school ever.
But no one said hi to us. Everyone was like, what the heck? And then I remember seeing people, like, 2 years later, and we had started TikTok. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, hey guys.
Yeah, like the switch up was crazy. Like, people were like, oh my gosh, we used to be best friends. And I'm like,
I can't trust none of y'all. I was like, dang.
Yeah, because really the only true friends that we had were those 2 ones. And they were real ones. Like, they were always with us, like, no matter what, you know?
They were also very genuine and authentic people. And they still are to this day. Mm-hmm. And I feel like even now, maybe we don't see them as much. But, like, it's just, like, those core, like, childhood friends where you're like, dang, like, we went through life together, you know? And I really value that, too, you know? So, dang.
But that was pretty much the whole story.
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely more little stories in between that were unnecessary to talk about.
Yeah.
But if you guys ever want, like, you know, an extra story, like a bonus of this story, let us know, because we definitely have some interesting ones.
If you guys have any questions, we're actually going to have a Google Forms link down below in the YouTube description. If you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, go to the YouTube video, and we're going to have a Google Forms that you guys can ask us a ton of questions on, specifically about this topic. I think for Malia and I too, like, we want to let you guys know that being yourself and being comfortable in your own skin is so important, and it takes a while to get there. But once you do, you don't have to listen to other people's opinions.
Right.
And you don't have to be easily influenced by the people around you. And you can be your genuine and authentic self. And if people don't like that, then that sucks for them.
Yeah.
You gotta do you and what's best for you and your life. Like, partying and all this random stuff in high school, it doesn't get you anywhere.
Yeah.
Like, let's be honest. Yeah. Like, it really doesn't, and it didn't for us.
And
you know,
a big one too is surrounding yourself with good people, because as you guys can see, when you're young and naive, especially for me, like, you can get influenced so easily.
Yeah.
And I feel like when you surround yourself with people that are doing bad things and maybe don't have the best moral compass, you're eventually going to kind of go down the route that they are.
Or you're going to want to do those things.
Right.
When maybe, I remember in 8th grade, I told myself, oh, I would never hit a vape. Oh, I would never do this. I would never do that. And not even 3-4 months later, I'm doing all the things I said I would never do.
Yeah.
And it's like, when you're around people and you're in those settings where you're surrounded by negative energy or bad things or bad people, whatever the case may be, it's easy to be influenced by people. It
and
truly is.
Things are okay, because I remember being around so many people and everyone was like, oh, this is okay. Like, I do this, I do that. And I'm like, oh, well, if they do it, then it's fine for me to do it too.
Or they do worse things.
Right.
It's like, oh, they're doing that. I would never do that.
But, like,
this is only a little step in that direction, so it's okay.
Yeah.
You know? So it's like, okay, that's not a good place to be at. And comparing yourself to other people too. Like, that's never good. But it's hard. I feel like it's hard being a young teenager, and also, like, with your parents, knowing that they have the best intentions with you. I think that's a big thing that I learned, was my parents, they don't hate me. They don't want me to have a terrible time in high school. They don't want me to have a terrible relationship with my friends and not be able to do things that they're allowed to do.
Right.
They just want to protect me from the terribleness in this world. Because there are bad people out there. Genuinely.
I feel like realizing that now, because I'm like, okay, I can actually look back and be like, those rules do make sense.
Yes.
You know? And some of them may be a little extreme, but it was always coming from a good place.
And I think too, like, our parents, it was their first time parenting 2 teenagers, 2 teenage girls, you know? So it's like, of course, maybe they would change a few things, and they definitely changed, you know, kind of their parenting strategy, I feel like, with our younger siblings, Max and Michaela.
Yeah.
But I think it's a cool transition to see, you know, me and you growing up, kind of having that realization that we don't need to be doing what everyone else is doing.
Right.
And people have different paths in life.
And the cool thing too, I feel like what came out of this whole situation is that after we rebuilt our trust with our parents, like, our relationship is so much better now. Like, it started from a really bad relationship to an even better one, you know?
Honestly, like, a beautiful relationship. Like, it really blossomed, I feel like, over the past few years. And even, like, us moving out now, like, we still have such a good relationship with our parents, and there is trust there.
Right.
And also, it's like we both have respect for each other. I think that was one thing that I lacked, was I didn't necessarily respect my parents.
Or authority in general.
Or authority, or, you know, teachers. And looking back, it's just like, dang.
Yeah.
How can you not respect anybody else but yourself?
Yeah.
Like, that's, like, if I could go back, it would be a character switch for sure.
Yeah.
It would be like, being that selfish just is not healthy.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you're going to, like, shoot yourself in the foot, because no one's going to want to be your friend if you only care about yourself.
Right.
Like, that's terrible, honestly, you know? So I think those are some really big, like, life lessons that maybe we learned a little bit young, but I'm so glad that we did, because I feel like I feel more confident in myself now. And I know that obviously I've learned so much from that season of life.
Yeah.
You know? So.
Yeah. No, me too. It's crazy, because the fact that we have such a good relationship with mom and dad is so like, I love it. Like family is so important to me. And I felt like that brought us closer together too. Like I feel like I can talk to my mom about pretty much anything. Yeah. And it's so cool that we have that now. And I think that wouldn't have happened if we didn't go through what we did.
I agree.
You know, yeah, even though that was really extreme, sometimes like that kind of needed to happen for us because like you said, we did grow from that. And a lot of our thinking and the way we did things changed.
Well, I remember too, I think it was going into senior year, mom and dad, they said, hey, we've seen that you guys have grown a lot. Do you want to go back to school? They gave us the option. And Malia and I are like, honestly, no. Like, I don't want to go back because, for one, I know that I was easily influenced and that could be a possibility again. So I don't want to put myself in that situation. And then two, I think we realized that a lot of our friends weren't really our friends.
And no one really cared about us. Like, I feel like it was really just our two main friends that we had. But everyone else, I was like, I don't care to go back.
Yeah. And I think, too, also, like, I think our little sister, she kind of deals with this now. And we didn't really have to deal with it for that long. But only for the year we were there was, like, the racism. Yeah. Like, I don't know how I would have put up with that all 4 years of high school. I got old of it after the first year. You know?
Well, it's like, yeah, at any time that's terrible. So that was like another thing. I was like, yeah, I don't care to go back to
a school where people don't actually like you.
Right.
And will call you the N-word every day of your life. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, maybe we'll make another episode about like that portion of it because I feel like it's hard to navigate that as like if you're the only person of color at your school or your environment, like how to go about that.
Because I remember everyone would be like, oh, it's a joke, like settle down, like it's not that deep.
It's actually just funny. Like it's not freaking funny.
Oh yeah, you're right, it is funny. And I'd be like, haha, and then like walk away. Like, but now obviously I'd be like, you know, that's not appropriate. Like what the heck are you doing and saying?
It's so hard because we were in that situation and we couldn't leave. So it's like, do we want to be the people where we're like, that's not a joke, that's not funny, but you're the only person who says that? Because the other 18 kids that were minorities would just take it. And we were kind of in the same boat of like, okay, I guess it's funny. But now, obviously, we just don't hang out with racist people. So it's like, it's an easy solution. But if we were still in school and we had to like learn how to go about that, you know? Like, I don't know, I feel like that'd be hard.
How to address it. Yeah.
So,
but that'll be a whole nother episode. We could go on for hours, but that's pretty much it for this episode, guys. I hope you
learn from our mistakes.
Learn from our mistakes because I know our little siblings did, and that's kind of why we wanted to tell this story because we did learn a lot, and we grew a lot from it too. Yeah. So,
and I think like learning that yes, you can make mistakes, but the learning process is so important. Yeah, and like. Not beating yourself up because I think that season of us being alone, a lot of the time I'd be like, oh my gosh, like, why did I do those things? Like, I wish I never did that. And we all make mistakes as humans. Yeah. No one's perfect. And I think like realizing that and wanting to be better once you do have that realization is so like powerful.
It's
honestly.
The wanting to be better and wanting to be different and wanting to move on from your old self because that's so important. And
that's what makes the change.
Right.
Yeah.
But that is it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Make sure to follow us on Big Sis Energy with 2 Ys on Instagram. You guys will be updated there for new episodes and things like that.
Yes.
Comment down below your questions, comments, concerns, all of that. And we'll see you guys in the next Big Sis Energy podcast.
Sweet.
Peace.
Thank you, guys. Peace.